The early 80s were littered with crossovers between Marvel and DC Comics. Batman had teamed up with the Incredible Hulk. Spider-Man had crossed paths with Superman twice. And now the two publishers' most popular teams at the time were going to meet. Little did anyone realise then that it would be the last crossover between the two companies until the next decade. We have already looked at the history of this kind of endeavour in previous episodes, mainly in my review of the second Superman-Spider-Man crossover. Link here. But, in brief, Marvel and DC first collaborated on 1975's MGM's Marvellous Wizard of Oz. The first crossover between characters actually owned by those companies came the following year with Superman vs. The Amazing Spider-Man, which I haven't reviewed yet, but I will get to eventually. I'll tell you what, when I do produce that episode, I'll stick a link to it in the corner of the screen right about now. Of course, that dream pairing proved to be a massive success, and so a few years later, a deal was agreed to produce a series of intercompany crossovers at a rate of one a year. Great news for comic fans. The series began with a second meeting between the Man of Steel and the Wallcrawler in 1980, a book that apparently raked in $300,000 worth of profit. The deal with these co-productions was that the creative teams would alternate between the publishers. The 1980 comic was basically a Marvel production, with DC giving editorial approval. A year later, and it was a DC team, with Marvel's editorial approval, that produced Batman vs. the Incredible Hulk, as part of DC's special series title. So far, so good. The working relationship was mostly working well, and all the books were popular. Another thing they all had in common was that they had all been released in the oversized Treasury format. But as 1982 rolled around and the next collaboration was due, the format was tweaked. First things first, who would be the stars? From the outset of Marvel and DC's plans, the stars of the crossovers were obvious. There would be both houses' most popular characters. For Marvel, it would be Spider-Man, the Hulk, the X-Men and the Avengers. For DC, Superman, Batman, the Teen Titans and the Justice League of America. Fair enough. This time around for Marvel, let's go over the X-Men. The Children of the Atom made their debut in 1963, in the same month as the Avengers, which still seems incredible, even though it isn't quite the coincidence it appears to be. I spoke about that in more detail in my review of the Avengers vs. X-Men crossover. Here's another link for you. As sales of that title waned, it became a reprint book, before a major overhaul of the team in 1975 set them on the road to becoming one of the most popular superhero titles ever. That's a hell of a turnaround. Come 1982, and the team was still pretty much as it had been for that relaunch. Banshee had left, and of course Thunderbird didn't last long at all. Kitty Pryde was a relatively new addition to the roster, but otherwise all of the classic members of the team were still there, as they would be for years to come. So we all know about the X-Men, but what about DC's representatives, the Teen Titans? As usual, I am pretty much in the dark about the DC side of the equation. I know they kind of started up in 1964, when a handful of teenage sidekicks teamed up in issue 54 of The Brave and the Bold. When they returned in issue 60, they were joined by Wonder Girl and went by the name of the Teen Titans. Eventually, they proved popular enough to get their own series, cover dated February of 1966. As with the X-Men, their popularity fluctuated. It was cancelled for a few years, between 1973 and 76, and then only continued for another 2 years before being cancelled again. Once more, it was a redesign of the team that set them on the path to success. Two top-class creators in the form of writer Marv Wolfman and penciler George Perez joined forces to once more relaunch the title. Robin, Wonder Girl and Kid Flash were still there, but now they were joined by new characters, Raven, Cyborg and Starfire. Not only that, but Beast Boy was now calling himself Changeling. After a preview of the new roster in issue 26 of DC Comics Presents, cover dated October of 1980, the team's new series was launched the following month. And it was a success. The new Teen Titans upset the established order by quickly becoming DC's most popular title of the early 80s. I suppose I should see it for myself really, shouldn't I? This is issue 19, released around the same time as the X-Men team-up. The same duo that relaunched the title are still here, which is no great surprise, as they were associated with the team for years, especially Marv Wolfman. He has a long list of credits, the majority of which are with DC, but it is for this title, this team, that he is best known. The same could probably also be said of George Perez, a man whose ability to effortlessly render multi-character scenes made him a great fit for a team book. And not just this one. He also worked on a few issues of the Justice League of America, the Fantastic Four, and the Avengers. That stood him in good stead for the brilliant JLA Avengers crossover of the early 2000s. Obviously, to begin with, it's a great cover by Perez, with such lovely, clean lines. Inside we have what is essentially a 6-page prologue. Initially, we join Cyborg, who is lamenting over the fact that he put the life of a girl that he cares very deeply about in danger. And I suppose typically for George Perez, look at the amount of effort that he's put into those trees in the background. How many other artists would only show those at the front and then have the others blur into an indefinable dark mass? Also in this prologue, we visit New York State Correctional Prison, where we see that criminal Dr. Light is sick of being a failure. He's going to get his career back on track, beginning with escaping his incarceration. And maybe it's my lack of knowledge where this character is concerned, but I really can't work out how he escapes just by turning the light on in his cell. I mean, couldn't he have turned that on earlier in his sentence? But escape he does to his hidden laboratory in New Jersey, where he picks up a dodgy-looking spare costume and sees that an exhibition of Indian artefacts is opening at the museum. And that could make an interesting target for him. The story proper begins on page 7, where we join Starfire and Wonder Girl. And Starfire is in a bit of a funk, because she has recently lost the man that she loves. And Wonder Girl says she mustn't let his death eat away at her. It's been 2 months now. She's got to snap out of it. Yeah, Starfire, it's been 2 whole months. Move on already. So we know about Cyborg and Starfire's personal issues. Anyone else? Yes, Raven. She is moping around, lamenting the fact that she can't experience emotions the way that other people can. Robin offers to share the load, but she doesn't want to talk about it. And after inducing a quick sleep in Robin, she slips away. Dr. Light, meanwhile, is salivating at the thought of getting his hands on those Indian statues. They are made with gold, platinum, silver, set with precious stones. And it doesn't take much effort from him to deal with the security guard. But it isn't the security guard he has to worry about, because the exhibition is actually curated by a man called Carter Hall, also known as Hawkman. And as he appears on the scene, Dr. Light shouts out, "Hawkman, why him? Why him?" Really? Hawkman? I mean, I'm no expert on him, but who would you prefer? Superman? Captain Marvel? The Flash? There is a brief skirmish, and then I'm not really sure what happens. I mean, after firing off a couple of light bolts, the two of them face each other down. There is a display of those Indian statues between the two of them, and as Dr. Light fires some more beams of light at Hawkman, they pass through some ancient crystals held in the hand of a Vishnu statuette, and emerge the other side, hitting the other statues on the table. Meanwhile, Hawkman takes one little hit to his wings, which he describes as a stray shot. So why is it a stray shot? Surely Dr. Light was aiming for him, and we don't see Hawkman dodge any other beams. Anyway, that's the least of Dr. Light's problems, because it seems that his starlight beams, passing through those crystals, have somehow brought the other statues to life. And not only that, but they're a hell of a lot bigger now. Dr. Light rather reasonably assumes that because he created these creatures, they will obey his commands. But they don't. So he flees the scene. However, they pursue him. He thinks, I know what I'll do. I will head to Titan's Tower, because maybe the Teen Titans will be able to get them under control. The Teen Titans themselves are having a nice relaxing evening, when Cyborg notices something coming their way and raises the alarm. This either alerts or wakes up all the other members of the team, including Kid Flash, who says that he has travelled 2,000 miles in just 3 seconds. This is typical DC overpowering. 2,000 miles in 3 seconds. So in 6 seconds, that'd be 4,000 miles, 40,000 miles in a minute, which over the course of an hour is stupidly fast. It's too much. Dr. Light arrives rather spectacularly at the tower, only to be met with the fist of Cyborg. It's quite entertaining seeing him being dissed by members of the team, including Kid Flash, who says that he would sell his own mother for a nickel. To which Dr. Light replies, "No, I wouldn't. Not for a nickel." Haha, that's a good line. There is quite a bit of chat before eventually the oversized Indian statues arrive. As they set to the tower, the Titans themselves are happy to leap into action, with Starfire being the first to take on one of the behemoths. Kid Flash is naturally too fast for them, but as one of them throws their axe at him, he realises that speed may not save him, as it follows wherever he goes. We also see Cyborg and Wonder Girl in action, in what is an action-packed battle. That axe following Kid Flash is eventually dealt with by Raven, who manages to send it back to the hand of its owner, as Changeling gives Cyborg a hand with one of the others. And now the tide of battle is really going to turn, because Hawkman has arrived. Yay. Actually, it's at this point that Robin realises that Dr. Light is nowhere to be seen, but he quickly guesses where he's gone. As the Doctor is plundering what riches remain at that museum, the Boy Wonder appears to put a stop to his schemes. Hawkman and Starfire are there too, and Hawkman realises that it was as a result of one of Dr. Light's light beams earlier on that these creatures were brought to life, and maybe Dr. Light can use the same kind of light to revert them to normal. But Dr. Light can't do it. He says that when Robin punched him, he broke the circuitry in his suit, so he now can't produce that light. But as the colossal statues arrive, he tells the Titans that the light he used to bring them to life was simple sun rays. This is something that Starfire herself can replicate, and she does so with the hoped-for effect on the statues. With that threat gone, all they need to do now is deal with Dr. Light, who quickly finds himself back behind bars. Well, that was a really good, enjoyable comic. We saw the Titans work as a team, and Robin is clearly a natural leader, although the older head of Hawkman seemed to help. Although I'm still not sure why Dr. Light is so in awe of him. Good stuff. Returning to the crossover, the creative pendulum had swung back in the direction of Marvel. That meant it would be their creative team working on the next book, with DC giving editorial approval. The guardian of all things X-Men at the time, Chris Claremont, was on board from the beginning, agreeing a basic outline of the plot with editor Louise Jones. His choice as writer was obvious. The artist, not so much. The X-Men's current penciler, Dave Cockrum, wasn't involved, nor was the only other obvious choice John Byrne. Instead, Walt Simonson, a man who editor Louise would go on to become very familiar with, was chosen. Or rather, he chose the book. He happened to be passing the office as Chris and Louise were filling out the plot details. And being a big Jack Kirby fan, when he heard Darkseid mentioned, one of the King's creations, he felt he just had to be involved. Here is the product of their efforts, with Walt producing the cover too. I have no issues with the art on the cover, but something about it has never sat well with me. I think it's the balance between the size of the team names and the size of the Marvel and DC Present banner. The team names should be bigger and that banner smaller, surely. By now you'd have spotted how this one differs from its predecessors. It's the first one to be produced in standard comic book dimensions rather than treasury size. That said, it is 3 times thicker than a standard comic book, and as was always the case with these intercompany efforts, it carried no adverts, except for a couple of house ads for the two rival companies. Make yourself comfy then and get the popcorn, because this should be a blockbuster. We have the distinctive artistic style of Walt Simonson in this comic, which I appreciate. However, I did struggle to work out exactly what I was looking at with this first splash page. I guess it conveys the scale of the setting, but yeah, it did take a while before I was clear on exactly what I was looking at. What we are looking at is Metron and Dark's, another mystery character, discussing these Promethean giants who once attempted to breach the wall, this great celestial barrier. And for trying to do that, they were punished. They paid the ultimate price. And Dark's, the mystery character, doesn't understand why, despite their fate, Metron also wants to try to penetrate the wall. But he does. Whatever lies beyond the wall is the one mystery in all of existence that still eludes him. So in exchange for Metron's Psychon wave, whatever that is, the mystery figure gives him a piece of equipment of his called the Omega Phase Helmet. And that will enable him and his Mobius chair to penetrate the wall. However, it doesn't take long for us to see that even if Metron does penetrate the wall, his chair clearly doesn't. And now it seems that the mystery figure is confident that nothing will be able to stop him from ruling the entire galaxy. Meanwhile, in Westchester, we join the X-Men who are training in the Danger Room. And it looks like Colossus and Wolverine are even practicing the fastball special. What this scene does do is it shows the DC readers Wolverine's personality. In fact, his character gets more attention than any other at this moment in time. That said, his colleagues do get to showcase their abilities, with Nightcrawler teleporting, Colossus showing his impressive durability and strength, Kitty Pryde phasing through the wall, and even Cyclops using his optic blasts to shoot Paul, and Storm creating a little storm cloud to water a hanging basket, which seems more like showing off than Cyclops' trick to me. That night they all have troubled sleep, as all of them have vivid dreams of their former teammate Jean Grey. All except Kitty, that is, who instead dreams of some dark-faced malignant entity, which draws from her a scream that wakes her teammates. At that point, there's a knock at the front door, and it seems Jean Grey is there, back from the dead, in her Phoenix costume. The image soon fades, but understandably, it freaks Scott Summers out. They aren't the only team to get a rude awakening that night, because over at Titan's Tower, Raven is having her own dream, but not of Jean Grey. Instead, it's of the Phoenix Force itself. Now it's her turn to scream, and her teammates' turn to run to her aid. As scary as the dream was, what is more scary for Raven is that she says sometimes her dreams come true. She begins to describe the creature from her dream, and as Changeling joins them, he decides to see if he can approximate that creature, which draws an unexpected reaction from Starfire. Regaining her composure, she apologises and explains that she knows the Phoenix, an entity she calls the Evil One, and seeing it made her lose control. I like this. It's clever. It makes sense. Starfire is an extraterrestrial, and Phoenix was very much an extraterrestrial threat, a threat to countless other planets. There are bound to be lots of races that we've never seen in a Marvel comic that were affected by the Phoenix, or at least knew of it. Here is one of them. There must be billions more. Starfire is so concerned by this threat that she sets off the Titan's red alert. And as we've seen before, that brings all the other members of the team running. This includes a nice touch where we see Cyborg heading back to the tower, and he passes a ruined skyscraper that he says was recently destroyed by the X-Men. And he wonders why the Titans have never crossed paths with them before. I have had a look to see if this demolished skyscraper was actually a direct reference to a specific incident from the X-Men books at this time. That would have been really tight continuity, wouldn't it? But I can't find anything. If you know otherwise, please let me know. The only member of the team that isn't present is Robin. He has been tied up dealing with what he thought was a burglary. However, the burglar turned out to be something very unexpected. Robin doesn't know what it is, but Deathstroke does, as he tells the Boy Wonder that it is a parademon, and it is working for him. Deathstroke then quickly knocks out Robin, and it's whilst he is unconscious that the Titans alert sounds. The X-Men have been trying to get to the bottom of Jean Grey's reappearance. Professor X says that there have been a number of mysterious incidents globally at specific places where in life Jean manifested the Phoenix power. He thinks that if this pattern continues, they should be able to predict where the next incident will occur, and that could provide them with some valuable clues as to what's going on. Robin, meanwhile, has been found by the rest of the Teen Titans, and as he recovers, Starfire gives us a bit more detail about her history with Phoenix, and in so doing ties the continuity of Marvel and DC a little bit closer together. She explains that whilst a slave, she's being transported upon a huge battleship, and the commander of that battleship was contacted by Empress Lilandra of the Shi'ar Empire, and she warned him of the threat from Phoenix. And then Starfire and the rest of that crew watched as Phoenix made a star go supernova, consuming an entire solar system and all who lived within it. She then thought that Phoenix was dead, but Raven's dream may well indicate otherwise. Robin makes an interesting comment, as he says that cosmic menaces are a bit out of the Teen Titans League. Maybe they should notify the Justice League or the Avengers. But Starfire helps for the support, the help of her team to get to the bottom of this mystery. One of them says that the X-Men used to have a member that was called Phoenix. Maybe they would be a good place to start. We then catch up with Deathstroke and the Parademons and the mysterious figure from... it's Darkseid, okay? Clearly it's Darkseid. I don't get it. Is it supposed to be a mystery or not? Anyway, he wants the X-Men. He wants them captured, alive and undamaged. I think we've had enough setup by now, haven't we? Time for some proper action, although not necessarily in the way you may have imagined. Because although we are now at the X-Men's mansion, we are not going to see the Parademons fighting the Young Mutants, because it's the Teen Titans that arrive first. Not only that, but the only X-Man there is Professor X, who responds to Starfire's awesome entry in kind. With Starfire out for the count, the Professor could probably take down the rest of the Titans, if it wasn't for Cyborg's high-frequency sonic attack. That breaks his concentration, allowing Raven to finish the job off. With the rest of the X-Men away from the mansion, the opportunity arises for some mistaken identity, as the Parademons arrive and assume that the Titans are the X-Men. And they are pretty darned effective. Cyborg is quickly taken out of the picture, and speaking of speed, even Kid Flash is easily dealt with, as one of the Parademons says he would increase the efficiency of his battlesuit so that Kid Flash appears to be moving in slow motion. I'm sorry, that's nonsense. We already know that Kid Flash moves at the speed of light. How fast must that suit be operating at to make him look like he's going in slow motion? Nonsense. After a couple more rounds of combat, the battle is over, as all Teen Titans are captured. All, that is, except for Changeling, who, changing his appearance to look like a parademon, follows as they take their leave. Deathstroke and some other parademons, meanwhile, are in New Mexico, and we get an explanation behind those recent mysterious global incidents. It seems that they have been gathering residual psychic energy that was left by Phoenix wherever she manifested herself on Earth. Their boss, whoever that is gathering it all together, although Deathstroke at the moment doesn't know why. But for now, he has other concerns, because it seems that the X-Men could indeed predict the next location of these incidents. In a team-up between the X-Men and the Teen Titans, we all know who we want to see battling Deathstroke, don't we? And here he is. And from the outset, his battling prowess impresses Deathstroke. Initially, all the X-Men do well, whether it be Cyclops' optic blasts, an impressive show of strength from Colossus, Storm's elemental powers, or even the teamwork between Kitty Pryde and Nightcrawler. But it doesn't last. A fear ray deals with Storm, whilst a toxic cloud knocks out most of the rest of the team. An energy disperser bolt deals with Cyclops, and Colossus, the last member of the team standing, doesn't stand for long. For our main villain, it must feel like birthday and Christmas have been wrapped into one, as first the unconscious Teen Titans are delivered to him, followed quickly by Deathstroke and the captured X-Men. In addition, it doesn't take long for him to spot Changeling, and he quickly adds him to the others who now all awaken in some giant contraption. Kitty recognises the evil mastermind as the dark entity from her dream. Even she, with her phasing ability, cannot escape the manacles they're all being held in. And soon they are all drained of their memories of Phoenix in an attempt to give those memories that residual power that the parademons were collecting, to give them physical form. And indeed, once more, the Phoenix is born. And thank God, because clearly Chris Claremont and the editors were waiting for Phoenix to introduce herself so that the DC villain could finally introduce himself. You'll never guess who it is. Surprise, surprise, it's Darkseid. And that Phoenix costume really was great, wasn't it? Instantly, she and Apocalypse join forces, and he explains his plan. He is caught in a war between his side and the Lords of Light. He intends to create a second Apocalypse, the name of his realm, to create it from the ashes of the earth. And to do so, he's going to have to create vast apocalypse pits on Earth. And eventually, voila, a new apocalypse is born. And look, we know that Sal was a big fan of Jack Kirby, and that's a very Kirby-esque image of Darkseid. Strangely, in all that explanation, he doesn't say what he needs Phoenix for. Just help, I suppose. He and she and all of his hordes then leave the scene, and as they do so, the restraints holding our heroes vanish. Now that the two teams know they're working on the same side, they meet fully for the first time. Wolverine says it's not his style to work with kids, presumably apart from Kitty Pryde and Colossus, who are both teenagers. And Kid Flash comments on the fact that Colossus is Russian, something that he seems quite shocked by. That makes sense. This is still the early 80s. The Cold War was in full swing. So it must have been quite a bold move to have a Russian in the team, especially one with such a gentle nature as Peter does. Because at this point, Russians were always cast as the villains. And then they come across something that's quite handy, as they find Metron's chair floating around. Well, that's going to be helpful for Professor X, although Kitty and Changeling are the first people to sit in it. Whilst they chat, Kitty says that she wishes she was home. And being Metron's chair, that's exactly where it takes them. Although they quickly return. They use the Mobius chair to transport themselves back to Earth and back to New York City. Once there, Professor X can trace Phoenix's unique psionic matrix to somewhere below Central Park. Transporting themselves onward to that subterranean lair, they, and particularly Wolverine, are greeted by Deathstroke. And the parademons, of course. Although our heroes are holding their own against the parademons, there seem to be limitless numbers of them, so they need to escape. They do this thanks to a visually striking piece of teamwork. Cyborg's white sound generator holds the parademons at bay briefly, but that gives Cyclops enough time to blast an escape route, and Storm enough time to bring the roof down on their enemies. And there are plenty more striking images in the pages to come. It's only just occurred to me just how strong and vivid the colours are in this comic. This isn't a reprint. This is the original from 1982, and the colours really are noteworthy for that period. I guess it's down to being printed on better quality paper, so the inks sit on top of it rather than being soaked into the page. The heroes have finally reached the villains, and we are all set up for the grand finale, which begins with Deathstroke vs Wolverine Part 3, where Wolverine finally pops his claws. Starfire tries to take on Phoenix, but of course is hopelessly out of her depth. As too is Raven, whose attempts to subdue Phoenix also meet with failure, before Phoenix then ignites the first of Darkseid's pits. And again, what a picture. Whilst the supporting cast continue the fun and games, and Darkseid explains how their attempts are futile, Kitty Pryde and Changeling are having fun sabotaging his machinery. Professor X tells Raven that if they combine their powers, he believes that they can defeat Dark Phoenix. How? By using the one weapon to which that entity is most vulnerable: the power of love. And as corny as it sounds, it looks spectacular. And whilst Cyclops gives Wolverine an assist against Deathstroke, the psychic war continues between Professor X and Raven on one side and the entity known as Phoenix on the other. And the good guys are winning. Robin has an idea. He tells Phoenix that it needs power to sustain itself, and so it should reabsorb the Phoenix Force bolt that it fired into Darkseid's pit. Darkseid tries to intervene, but is taken down first of all by Kid Flash, who we really haven't seen much of in this, and then a tag team of heroes, with Starfire adding the finishing touch by firing star bolts directly into his eyes. This is enough to stop him from intervening in what Dark Phoenix is doing, and she manages to reabsorb all of that power back into her. But it isn't enough. She can feel herself continue to unravel. Darkseid, with his machinery destroyed, doesn't also want to lose Dark Phoenix, and he says to her, there is a way to preserve both your life and power. She should take a physical form, one of those of the people around her. There is one obvious candidate. Now it is Scott Summers who has the internal battle between his conscience and that of the Phoenix Force. And it is during this mental trial that the Phoenix Force reasons that it would have been better off remaining as it was than to have this brief, painful resurrection. And it also reasons who is responsible. It's Darkseid. And now we have that common trope from many crossovers where the two antagonists turn on each other. But rarely has it looked as spectacular as it does here. As Cyclops, with his visor removed, fires a hybrid Phoenix Force optic blast at Darkseid. It's fair to say it's effective. In fact, the Phoenix Force doesn't just blow Darkseid away, but it carries him away. Up through the Earth's atmosphere and across immeasurable distances, through and beyond all galaxies and stars, to the wall. And there, both meet their fate. With both threats gone, our heroes can finally relax. Although Storm has an interesting question. She says, if that Phoenix was Darkseid's creation and had no conscious existence prior to him creating her, then who or what appeared to them earlier? If there is an answer to that question, we aren't given it. Metron has answers though. He has returned from beyond the wall and seems satisfied with some of the new knowledge that he has acquired. As for the colossal wall itself, it now has a new face moulded into it. Now I'm going to go off script here because what I originally wrote was that having read this, it was alright. It was perfectly adequate, but none of the characters really got time in the spotlight to shine. And if the whole idea of these intercompany crossovers was to bring new readers to the characters, then I can't see that it would have succeeded for that reason. However, the more time I've spent on this review, the more I've looked at the artwork, at those colours, and appreciated Chris Claremont's always top-notch writing, I've realised it's bloody good. It's still true to say that the villains get more development than any of the heroes do, but nonetheless I would say that this is up there amongst the very best of the Marvel-DC collaborations. Just as good as the original Superman-Spider-Man team-up, but not quite as good as JLA Avengers. Anyway, back to the script. Let's have a look. Oh yes, of course. Of course, the comic was a sales success, and great news, a sequel was quickly planned. Bad news, it never happened. Towards the end of 1983, the second X-Men Teen Titans crossover should have hit newsstands. In terms of villains, we would have seen Brother Blood and, rather interestingly, the Hellfire Club. Respect for that decision. It would have been so easy to have thrown Magneto or the Juggernaut in there. It would have been DC's turn to provide the creative engine, and Marv Wolfman and George Perez were fully on board. But relations between the two publishers hit a new low that sank any chance of this project seeing the light of day. The catalyst was the proposed crossover between the Justice League of America and the Avengers. Over the years, both sides have blamed the other for that project not materialising, but it does seem that DC wanted to press ahead with a story that Marvel Editor-in-Chief Jim Shooter just didn't think was good enough. Some of the people involved thought that the issues were personal, including George Perez, and the acrimony felt meant that neither side was interested in working with the other again. They did, of course. Many more crossovers followed, but not for over a decade, and they weren't the X-Men Teen Titans, or JLA Avengers. Because DC had already started work on that project, some artwork from it does exist, and in 2003 it actually did happen, in style. But Brother Blood and the Hellfire Club never did get to pit their wits against the combined forces of comicdom's most popular teams of the 1980s.